The war on your mind, exposing the narcissist's weapon of gaslighting. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling disoriented, almost dizzy with confusion, like your own mind had betrayed you? Maybe you replayed the dialogue in your head, over and over, wondering, did I really say that? Am I remembering this wrong? Perhaps you even wished there was a recording, something objective to prove you weren't losing your grip on reality. And as the fog of doubt crept in, you began to wonder, am I overreacting? Am I going crazy? If that feeling sounds familiar, psychologists would tell you that you've likely experienced one of the most insidious forms of emotional manipulation, gaslighting. It's not just a trendy buzzword. It's a psychological assault on your perception of truth itself. Gaslighting dismantles your trust in your own thoughts, feelings, and senses. Over time, it erodes your confidence, your self-esteem, and your reality. As Dr. Robin Stern, author of The Gaslight Effect, explains, gaslighting isn't about making you believe a lie. It's about making you doubt your truth. The term gaslighting originates from a 1938 play, later adapted into a 1944 film, titled Gaslight. In it, a husband slowly manipulates his wife into believing she's insane. He hides objects, denies his actions, and insists she's imagining things. The titular gaslights in their home flicker, dimming night after night. But when she points it out, he swears she's hallucinating. As her reality bends under his control, she surrenders to his version of the world. Psychologists still reference this story because it captures, with eerie precision, how emotional abuse can make even the most self-assured person doubt their sanity. Modern gaslighting works much the same way. The abuser, whether a partner, parent, boss, or friend, systematically dismantles your sense of self by questioning your memory, invalidating your emotions, and twisting facts until truth feels slippery. According to clinical psychologist Dr. George Simon, gaslighters often use what's called cognitive distortion control. They alter how you process reality by introducing doubt and then positioning themselves as the only reliable source of truth. Slowly, your autonomy crumbles. You stop trusting your intuition and start seeking validation from the very person undermining you. But here's something even more haunting. Psychologists have discovered that gaslighting has a mirror version: self-gaslighting. When someone asks, "Can I gaslight myself?" the answer, disturbingly, is yes, though it operates differently. Self-gaslighting is when your own psyche begins to silence your truth before anyone else can. It's a defensive reflex, rooted in what psychologists call defense mechanisms, unconscious strategies your mind uses to protect you from emotional pain. These mechanisms, denial, repression, rationalization, aren't inherently bad. In fact, they're part of how we survive distress. When reality feels too painful, the mind whispers comforting lies like, "It's not that bad," or "Maybe it's my fault." Dr. Anna Freud, who first described defense mechanisms, noted that they often begin as adaptive tools. But when they're manipulated either by others or by ourselves, they become traps. That's precisely what gaslighting is. Someone else hijacking your defenses and using them against you. The gaslighter projects their own shame, fear, and insecurity onto you, forcing you to carry their psychological burden. Instead of saying, "I did something wrong," they insist, "You're remembering it wrong." Instead of confronting their own flaws, they make you question your perceptions. It's a psychological sleight of hand that leaves you feeling disoriented and guilty, while they remain comfortably blameless. Psychologists often liken this process to a form of psychic erosion, the slow wearing away of your inner voice. The danger lies in its subtlety. Gaslighters don't need to shout or threaten. Their power lies in suggestion. A raised eyebrow, a sarcastic laugh, a gentle, "You're being too sensitive." Small moments that, over time, accumulate into a profound internal fracture. Victims often describe feeling as though their mind has been colonized. They begin editing themselves, what they say, what they feel, what they remember, to maintain peace. So how do you protect yourself from this psychological fog? The first step, according to trauma therapists, is anchoring back to reality. Keep records, notes, messages, anything tangible that validates your experiences. Gaslighting thrives in confusion. Documentation restores clarity. Second, name the manipulation. Dr. Ramani Durvasula emphasizes that identifying gaslighting as abuse, rather than miscommunication, is crucial. The act of naming gives power back to the victim. It transforms confusion into recognition. Third, rebuild internal trust. Gaslighting fractures your relationship with your own intuition, so healing means relearning to trust your perceptions. Journaling, therapy, and mindfulness can help you reconnect with your emotional truth. Every time you affirm, "My feelings are valid," you reclaim a fragment of the self that was stolen from you. Finally, protect your psychological boundaries. Gaslighters thrive on emotional enmeshment, the merging of your sense of self with theirs. Boundaries are the antidote. As psychotherapist Dr. Lindsay Gibson explains, when you stop explaining yourself to a gaslighter, you begin to step out of their psychological web. It's not about convincing them, it's about freeing yourself. Gaslighting at its core is not about conflict. It's about control. It's a slow theft of your certainty, designed to make you surrender your truth in favor of theirs. But once you see the mechanism, once you recognize the flickering of the gaslight for what it is, their power begins to dissolve. Because reality, once reclaimed, burns brighter than any illusion they can construct. Imagine this. Your closest friend finds incriminating messages on her husband's phone. Messages that whisper of betrayal. Her heart races, her stomach churns. But then, she exhales and says, "It's probably nothing. I'm overreacting." In that moment, she isn't lying to you. She's lying to herself. Psychologists call this denial. An unconscious defense mechanism, an emotional barricade built not from deceit, but from sheer psychological survival. Dr. Anna Freud once described such defenses as the mind's attempt to save itself from pain it cannot yet bear. In the short term, denial acts like anesthesia, numbing the unbearable. But, as every therapist knows, what we suppress in the dark eventually festers. When your friend avoids facing the truth of her crumbling marriage, she's simply delaying her grief. According to clinical psychologist Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, denial is the mind's first refuge in trauma, a way to keep functioning while the heart catches up. But if left unchallenged, that refuge becomes a prison. Eventually, she must either confront reality or live indefinitely in quiet agony, suspended between illusion and despair. Now, imagine that same mechanism, denial, not used as self-protection but as a weapon. That's what happens when a narcissist or emotional abuser gaslights you. They twist a natural human defense into a calculated act of cruelty. When they say, "That never happened," or "You're imagining things," they aren't confused, they're orchestrating confusion. Psychologists describe this as projective denial. The abuser refuses to face their own guilt or shame and instead projects that distortion onto you. In their inner world, reality must be rewritten, not because the truth is unclear, but because the truth threatens their fragile ego. To the narcissist, denial is not just avoidance, it's domination. They weaponize it to protect their false self, the grandiose persona they've built to hide the deep emptiness beneath. As Dr. Ramani Durvasula explains, a narcissist's denial isn't about misunderstanding reality. It's about reshaping it to preserve their sense of superiority. So when they gaslight you, insisting you misheard, misremembered, or misunderstood, they're not seeking clarity. They're demanding submission. They want your reality to collapse into theirs. This is why gaslighting is so psychologically devastating. It hijacks your perception of truth. Picture finding those same illicit texts, confronting your partner, and hearing, "You're imagining it. That never happened. You're too sensitive." At first, your instincts scream that you're right, but slowly you begin to doubt yourself. Maybe you are too sensitive. Maybe you did read it wrong. Over time, that doubt becomes your new normal. You lose confidence not only in what you've seen, but in your capacity to know what is real. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance fatigue, the exhaustion of constantly reconciling conflicting realities. Gaslighting, in this way, is not merely a lie, it's psychological colonization. The narcissist convinces you that your perceptions are flawed, so you begin to rely on theirs. You internalize their voice until it becomes your own inner critic. Dr. Robin Stern calls this the gaslight tango, the dance between abuser and victim, where one denies reality and the other slowly agrees to stop trusting themselves. It's a slow erosion of identity. What makes this even more chilling is that narcissists know precisely when to dim the gaslight. They are strategic. They understand, consciously or not, that constant cruelty would drive you away too soon. So they alternate, offering affection, validation, or charm in between episodes of distortion. Psychologists refer to this as intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism that keeps people addicted to gambling or toxic love. That unpredictable cycle of reward and punishment wires your brain to crave their approval, even as they destroy your self-worth. When a narcissist gaslights, their phrases are deceptively simple but psychologically loaded. They say, "Stop being so sensitive." Translation, "Your feelings are mine to define." They say, "That never happened." Meaning, "I refuse to face my guilt, so you must bear it instead." They say, "You're being crazy." What they mean, "I'm terrified my behavior will expose me, so I'll call you unstable first." They say, "You're overreacting." What they mean, "Only emotions that serve my ego are allowed. Yours are forbidden." They say, "I was just joking." What they mean, "Your pain is entertainment." They say, "If you loved me, you'd let it go." What they mean, "Love to me means your silence." And perhaps the cruelest of all, "If you were better, smarter, prettier, more successful, I wouldn't have to treat you this way." What they mean, "Your suffering is my excuse to avoid my own inadequacy." Psychologists agree that this form of emotional warfare attacks the very foundation of self-esteem. Victims of gaslighting often internalize the idea that they are inherently inadequate. Dr. Carol McBride, an expert in narcissistic family dynamics, explains that repeated exposure to gaslighting reshapes the victim's inner dialogue. They begin to self-correct, apologize, and suppress emotions before the abuser even speaks. The abuser no longer needs to manipulate. The victim has learned to do it for them. But healing is possible, though it requires a profound act of courage. Reclaiming your right to your own perception. Therapists often recommend reality anchoring exercises. Writing down events as they happen, keeping screenshots or journals to affirm what you know to be true. This is not about revenge or proof. It's about grounding yourself in your own reality again. Equally vital is reconnecting with empathy, not for the abuser but for yourself. Many survivors of gaslighting struggle with self-alienation, a disconnection from their own emotions. Trauma specialists suggest self-compassion practices, like mindfulness and inner child work, to rebuild trust with your intuition. Every time you affirm, "I know what I saw, I know what I felt," you are reclaiming psychic territory once stolen from you. Lastly, psychologists emphasize boundaries, the ultimate antidote to gaslighting. Boundaries are how you say, "My reality is not negotiable." You may not convince the narcissist of the truth, but you can refuse to abandon your own. Healing, then, is not about making them understand, it's about making yourself whole again. Gaslighting is the narcissist's favorite illusion, a shadow play where they dim the light until you question your own eyes. But remember, even when they twist your vision, the truth remains, steady and unbroken, waiting for you to see it again. And once you recognize the flicker of manipulation for what it is, their power fades, because no one can control a mind that has learned to trust its own light. Inside the mind of a gaslighter, reality is a fragile shell, a hollow construct built to protect their false sense of self. But for the victim, stepping into that distorted world can slowly erode their very identity. Psychologists often emphasize that defense mechanisms, though necessary for survival, can become toxic when taken to extremes. Dr. Anna Freud once described them as useful lies we tell ourselves to manage unbearable truths. When these defenses are deeply entrenched, they begin to seal us off from reality itself. Now imagine when that same distortion is imposed on you, not by your own mind, but by someone else. That is the dark art of gaslighting. Gaslighting doesn't just cloud your thinking, it rewires your self-esteem. When your opinions, needs, and emotions are persistently denied or ridiculed, you begin to lose your internal compass. Over time, the constant invalidation fractures your relationship with yourself. According to trauma psychologist Dr. Judith Herman, repeated emotional manipulation leads to complex trauma, where the victim's sense of self becomes blurred and fragmented. You start forgetting who you are not because you're weak, but because your perception has been systematically dismantled. The very mirror that reflects your worth has been cracked by someone else's lies. Narcissistic gaslighters know how to find the most fragile parts of you, the soft, unhealed places that still ache from past criticism or rejection. They don't just exploit your insecurities. They sculpt their control around them. If you already struggle with low self-esteem, their words sound eerily familiar, echoing your own inner doubts. Clinical psychologist Dr. Ramani Durvasula notes that narcissists don't create your insecurity. They amplify what already lives inside you. They'll tell you you're overreacting, too sensitive, or imagining things. And because part of you already fears those things are true, you surrender your reality 1 inch at a time. Over time, this psychological erosion becomes so subtle that you no longer recognize it. Victims of chronic gaslighting often describe the same sensations: confusion, mental fog, dizziness, and emotional disorientation. It's as though you're underwater, unable to trust what you see or hear. Cognitive neuroscientists explain that this response mirrors the body's trauma state. When reality feels unsafe, the brain disconnects from sensory grounding, creating that floating sensation. It's a physiological reflection of psychological betrayal. You start to feel detached, watching yourself from afar, unable to grasp what's real and what's been rewritten by your abuser. In those moments, you might even experience something that feels disturbingly like relief. Psychologists call this trauma surrender, the moment your mind stops resisting distortion because compliance feels safer than truth. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, author of The Body Keeps the Score, explains that the brain seeks survival above all else. When constant resistance brings pain, submission feels like peace. So when you finally stop questioning the gaslighter and start agreeing with them, your mind mistakes the absence of conflict for the presence of safety. It's the cruelest illusion, mistaking the silence of self-erasure for calm. But there is a way back, though it begins with something deeply counterintuitive. To protect yourself from gaslighting, you must first examine your participation in the illusion. This isn't about blame, it's about reclaiming agency. Gaslighting is a dual fantasy. One person invents it, but it only persists if the other unconsciously joins it. Ask yourself, what truth am I avoiding? What pain feels too heavy to face? Sometimes the gaslighter story offers false comfort because it spares you from a harsher reality, like the end of a relationship or the collapse of an ideal. The first step toward freedom is daring to face the truth they refuse to see. The second defense against gaslighting, according to psychologists, is grounding in sensory reality. When your mind spins in confusion, anchor yourself in the physical world. What do you see, hear, touch, taste, and smell right now? These sensations are not up for debate. They belong solely to you. Trauma therapists often teach this method to restore the brain's sense of orientation. The key is to stay anchored in your body, not the gaslighter's words. And here's something crucial. Do not try to pull the gaslighter into your version of truth. Dr. George Simon, a clinical psychologist who studies manipulators, warns that trying to prove reality to a narcissist is like arguing with a mirror. Narcissism is sustained by fantasy, not evidence. Show them photos, texts, recordings, and they'll twist each one into another weapon against you. Their goal isn't understanding, it's domination. So, resist the urge to convince. Save your energy for something more powerful, your own clarity. Recovery begins when you start telling yourself the truth. All of it, even when it hurts. Because the more you lie to yourself, the easier it is for others to do the same. Radical honesty with yourself is the antidote to psychological manipulation. As you begin to rebuild your relationship with truth, your mind starts to stabilize, your boundaries strengthen. The gaslighter can no longer penetrate the walls of your awareness because you no longer rely on them to define reality. Of course, this isn't always easy, especially if you've lived in distortion for years. Long-term gaslighting creates what trauma experts call reality confusion. an inability to distinguish between your intuition and your fear. In such cases, seeking help from trusted friends, therapists, or support groups can be life-saving. They can act as external anchors, people who remind you of what's real when you forget. Psychologist Dr. Harriet Lerner emphasizes the importance of relational truth. We need others not to fix our reality, but to help us remember it. Above all, never isolate yourself. Gaslighters thrive in your silence, in the echo chambers of your self-doubt. Healing begins in connection with safe people, with your body, with the small, undeniable truths that no one can rewrite. Gaslighting, at its core, is theft, the theft of perception, of confidence, of selfhood. But recovery is reclamation. Every time you name what is real, you take back a piece of yourself. Every time you say, "I remember what happened," the illusion cracks, and one day, when the fog clears and the fantasy collapses, you'll see the truth. It was never madness. It was manipulation. And you, even in your confusion, were never weak. You were surviving a world someone else refused to face.